I'm Susan Yockey with VOA's Middle East Monitor. Coming up, just how effective are sanctions against Syria? Might Egypt's Islamists stress pragmatism?
You should never be afraid of Islam, because if the Islamists follow the Quran, there will be no problem.
Pakistan pulls the plug on the BBC over an anti-Pakistan documentary. And young women refugees sing about peace. It's all ahead on The Voice of America. Britain wants to further isolate Iran's financial sector, accusing Tehran of suppressing human rights within its own borders and helping to suppress human rights in Syria. Speaking outside a meeting of European Union foreign ministers in Brussels today, British Foreign Secretary William Hague said there is a link between Tehran's crackdown on opposition groups and Syria's violent crackdown on protesters.
There is a link between what is happening in Iran and what is happening in Syria, and I believe the Iranian government has given assistance to the Assad regime in trying to control and suppress protests in Syria. Of course, Iran has welcomed protests in other parts of the Arab world, but is against them in Syria and against them in Iran. And I think events across the Arab world this year, what we have come to call the Arab Spring, are behind the increasing suppression of human rights in Iran. I think the Iranian regime has felt itself in a weaker position domestically, and so it has put opposition leaders under house arrest. More than 500 people have been executed so far this year in Iran. Opposition movements are in general suppressed. This is the increasing suppression of human rights and of democracy, and is a big step backwards for Iran.
Britain on Wednesday expelled all Iranian diplomats from the country and shut its embassy in Tehran after it was attacked by an angry mob a day earlier. Hundreds of students gathered outside the British embassy in Tehran Tuesday, chanting "Death to Britain" before ransacking the compound. Earlier, sanctions were tightened in response to Iran's pursuit of a nuclear program that UN experts say appears intended to build weapons. Iran says its nuclear program is peaceful. Amnesty International has held a protest across the street from the United Nations, calling for the UN Security Council to take decisive action against Syria for what it calls crimes against humanity. Roughly 50 people attended the rally. Moha Abu Shama is the Amnesty International Syria campaigner.
Amnesty International is calling the UN Security Council to refer the situation in Syria to the International Criminal Court and to impose an arms embargo and to freeze the assets abroad of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and his senior associates.
She says international pressure on Syria is mounting.
Indeed, the Security Council shamefully have not acted since the beginning of the unrest 8 months ago until now. However, we think that they cannot keep on ignoring the amounting crimes against humanity that are being committed at the moment in Syria. The international pressure, I think, is increasing. Finally, the Arab League has made a move, which is a positive step towards more pressure on the Syrian authorities to end these violations. We think that it's high time now for the UN Security Council to move and to act and to refer the situation to the International Criminal Court.
Peter Wigig is Germany's permanent representative to the United Nations.
First of all, the Arab League has spoken. The Arab League has spoken, and that's an important event, really. The decisions of the Arab League have been momentous, I would say, if not historic. So now we've got to consider whether the Security Council takes up that messages that the Arab League send out, and in which way we could do it. I think we should listen to the Arabs here and consult very closely with them and be under their guidance. I think the Arab League should have a leading role in all of this, but the Council certainly, as I see it, has a role to play in that too, because it should not fall behind what an important regional organization says.
Peter Wigig, Germany's representative to the UN. European Union diplomats say member nations have agreed to tighten sanctions on Syria hours after an Arab League committee charged with implementing sanctions targeted Syria's rich and powerful. EU officials said today they added 11 more entities and 12 more individuals to a blacklist hit by travel bans and asset freezes. imposed in an effort to stop the Syrian government's bloody crackdown on anti-government protesters. An Arab League committee in Cairo released a list of 17 Syrians banned from traveling to Arab states. Months of brutal repression against Syrian protesters drove the Arab League last week to levy severe economic sanctions on the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. Unarmed civilians die each day on the streets in Syria's homegrown Arab Spring movement. The sanctions were a historic decision by Syria's Arab neighbors, the first time the League has agreed to economic sanctions against any member, let alone one of the founders of the League. David Arnold is a Middle East Voices senior reporter who has spoken with experts about just how effective these sanctions might be. He joined me in the studio to talk about what he has learned. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Sue.
Can these Arab League sanctions topple the Assad regime?
If you take into account previous sanctions, and particularly those of the European Union, where Germany, France, and Italy are the major buyers of Syria's crude oil, the experts are saying yes. But what's important about the Arab League's decision is it is fairly comprehensive, and it comes from Syria's old friends. Most importantly, Turkey, which is a former Syria ally and probably the biggest market for Syrian consumer goods. They have added their own anti-Assad sanctions. The weakness of the whole proposal is that two of the other neighbors, Iraq and Lebanon, have not yet signed on to the League's sanctions. Joshua Landis is the director of the Middle East Studies Center at the University of Oklahoma, and he's a well-regarded blogger on Syria. He gave me a grim picture of how people are already suffering a few days after the League's decision.
Most analysts and economists are looking at the value of the Syrian pound as the real barometer of how bad economic situation is becoming in Syria. For decades, Syria has had this sort of mantra that a steady pound, about 50 pounds to a dollar, 47 has been about the benchmark before the revolution started in March. 47 pounds to the dollar. And keeping that steady and keeping the exchange rate steady was a great point of pride for the Syrian government, and it was a way of saying to the world, we're in control of our economy. And even when Bush put on sanctions, and there was a lot of pressure on Syria after the Hariri murder and after the invasion of Iraq, Syria kept its exchange rate very solid. Today, it's at 59.4 Syrian pounds to a dollar. Since the beginning of March, the pound has fallen 25%. It's lost 25% of its value. That means people with bank accounts have if they've not been wiped out, they've been badly hurt. This makes buying anything abroad extremely difficult, and people are getting poor. Look, sanctions hurt people, and they get passed down. Everybody is saying that, we're just going to hurt the regime. Well, that's complete bunkum. I don't think any government official believes that. But government officials feel like they have to do something, and sanctions is a way to destabilize a country. Theoretically, it will make the people turn against their government.
Landis and another Syria expert, the National Defense University's Dr. Murhaf Georgiati, have strong and slightly divergent views, but they both feel that the League sanctions have great power. And they agree that a resolution from the UN Security Council would add great legitimacy to the effort to end Assad's rule in Syria. Gary Huffbauer, co-author of a study of an estimated 200 efforts to levy sanctions to remove governments, says Russia and China will not approve a UN resolution. And what's more, he says, Assad will be defeated anyway. Huffbauer, who is a researcher at the Peterson Institute for International Economics in Washington, D.C., says the businessmen in Damascus and Aleppo are the key to getting rid of Assad.
Well, I think the resolution looks like chaos. It might be a quick departure of the leader, but the example in Libya indicates a strong disposition to hold on to the last. And it must be said, if you looked at kind of our whole panel of 40-odd regime change cases, these leaders who are autocratic and have been there a long time, they very seldom go easily. So that would be a surprise if Assad just suddenly decided, to leave while he can and while he can find asylum. But more likely, these sanctions will erode his business support. Syria has had actually a relatively good economy in a very troubled region for quite some time because business goes on, provided you don't get involved in the politics. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. The businessmen will have trouble. They are supporters of the regime. They don't want the chaos, and that may very well tip the balance within Syria because a lot of the businessmen will have family and friends in the security forces, and then that will cause rethinking by some of the security forces, and that's how these things typically tend to go.
That was Gary Huffbauer, who has studied 40 regimes that have been changed by economic sanctions. I might add that while Turkey and some other countries may be floating the idea of a military intervention, Huffbauer is placing his bets on Syria's merchant class ending the Assad regime. Even if Assad falls, and that could take some time, Syria will feel the pain of these sanctions.
Well, thank you, David, for your insight.
You're very welcome, Sue, and thanks for inviting me in.
That's Middle East Voices senior reporter David Arnold in our Washington studios.
Are you looking for a comprehensive daily look at events reshaping the Middle East? Visit voanews.com/ME. You'll find VOA's original reporting from the region, in-depth analysis from our Washington team, VIP interviews, online polls, photo essays, and mini documentaries. Bookmark us or add us to your RSS reader. That's voanews.com/ME.
The extent of Egypt's Islamist Party's appeal will come into clearer focus in coming weeks as results from the nation's first post-revolution elections come in. So far, expressions of support have been strong, especially in areas outside the capital. VOA's Elizabeth Arid visited Fayoum, south of Cairo, a bastion of conservative Islam that now appears yearning for practical solutions to the country's problems.
For an apparently tranquil town, Fayoum has a violent past. Killers for one of the most extreme Islamist groups Egypt has ever known came from here, but Gamma Islamiyah is showing a more moderate face these days. Mohammed Marzouk, a spokesman for Gamma, is running for a seat under its Construction and Development Party banner. He explains that Egypt needs a modern state with an Islamist background. He promises his party will solve the problems of the country and his constituents at the highest level. The candidate for a group accused of plotting President Anwar Sadat's 1981 assassination and of carrying out the 1997 massacre of tourists at Luxor now stresses pragmatic concerns. He discusses plans to make laws creating social justice so that there would no longer be businesses where one employee earns 300,000 Egyptian pounds while another makes only 300. Though Gamma Islamiyah renounced violence in 2003, the shift from murder to income redistribution might seem impossibly abrupt. But many in this hard-hit oasis town are taking the group at its word. Voter Hussein Al-Sayed.
You shouldn't be afraid of Islam. You should never be afraid of Islam. Because if the Islamists follow the Quran, there will be no problem.
But some do foresee problems, in particular the country's minority Christians. Marzouk offers words of reassurance. He says Christians will not be persecuted and that his party will give them their rights just like the Muslims. The law, he says, will be applied equally. As he campaigns, though the sincerity of the Gamma candidate's words in general are called into question, Marzouk greets rival candidate SM Harazah just as the Waft politician is getting ready for an interview. Harazah accuses Marzouk of making nice for the cameras, but meanwhile having his campaign posters torn down. Marzouk denies that's going on, and the Waft candidate doesn't press the point. Harazah even makes concessions to the religious wave, adapting his party's liberal foundation for the audience in Fayoum. The Waft, he says, will keep away from the idea of liberalism and secularism. It's a new era in Egypt, with the Waft moving away from modernity and Jamaat Islamiyah moving toward it, and the fight for an acceptable middle ground, at least rhetorically, is underway. Elizabeth Barrett, VOA News, Fayoum.
If you crave the latest news and analysis about the Middle East, follow us on Twitter. You can find it by searching at VOA Middle East. Every day we tweet VOA's own special reports, analysis, VIP interviews, photo essays, and mini documentaries. Plus, you get the latest buzz from VOA's Mideast team and correspondents. VOA Middle East on Twitter. Get a read on the news before it happens. Pakistan's cable operators have pulled the plug on the BBC World News TV channel in a move it hopes will be a warning to other foreign broadcasters. Amid anger over a BBC documentary the cable companies describe as anti-Pakistan propaganda, the British broadcaster may now face government punitive action as well. VOA's Kurt Aitchen has details from Islamabad.
Pakistani cable subscribers who watch the BBC World News TV channel have had nothing to look at on the channel since Tuesday night but a graphic still shot of a satellite with a red X drawn over it. Accompanying text says, "Service is currently not available. Sorry for the inconvenience." In fact, it was Pakistani cable operators who caused the inconvenience when they deliberately cut the channel shortly before midnight local time. The public justification for the move was said to be a response to a documentary the British channel broadcast several weeks earlier called Secret Pakistan.
This series tells the hidden story of how for a decade Pakistan deceived America and the West and was then found out.
The two-part documentary, which the BBC commissioned from an independent third-party production company, builds a case that Pakistan's military deliberately aided the Taliban and al-Qaeda, even as it assured Washington and NATO that it was an ally in the fight against the militants. After the first half of the series aired, a Pakistani military spokesman derided the series as baseless, concocted, and malicious. Pakistan's Cable Association, which is a non-governmental industry organization, says it is singling out the BBC as a warning to all foreign broadcasters. Khalid Arain is a spokesman for the association. He says any other foreign broadcaster who wishes to put Pakistan on trial may well find itself boycotted by cable TV operators as well. The BBC issued a statement condemning any action that, in its words, threatens our editorial independence and prevents audiences from accessing our impartial international news service. It urges that the channel be reinstated in Pakistan as soon as possible. Cable operators are not legally bound to broadcast foreign channels within Pakistan, leaving the BBC with relatively few channels of recourse for the moment. Officials here now also say they are taking a closer look at the Secret Pakistan program to see if the BBC violated any of the country's media laws. Abdul Jabbar is a spokesman for PEMRA, the Pakistan Electronic Media Regulatory Authority. He says the cable operators' actions are to be seen as an expression of the public's anger against the BBC. After carefully studying the documentary, he says PEMRA will come up with its own opinions and will not hesitate to take action against any broadcaster that provokes violent sentiments among Pakistanis. The move raises concern about censorship in the Muslim country, where Facebook was briefly banned last year, and the country's telecommunications authority sought to block text messages containing prohibited words earlier this month. Kurt Aitchen, VOA News, Islamabad.
When the girls in the Pisintu Multicultural Children's Chorus sing about peace, the tunes have meaning for them. Many are refugees who fled their homes in the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, seeking refuge from war, persecution, and famine. In their performances and a new CD, they bring a message of hope to audiences in and around their adopted home of Portland, Maine. Josie Hong has their story.
At practice this week, it's business as usual. It means goofing off, braiding each other's hair, and playing with makeup. But choral director Con Fulham snaps them to attention.
Let's make this a hot little rehearsal here, right? Let's make this happen.
Girls file into 2 rows and stare straight at him.
If we put our hands together, if we open up our minds, we'll find 1,000
This song is called Bells of Freedom. It was written by Fulham and Judith Abdallah, a founding member of the children's chorus.
Singing about peace, about coming together, about stopping the wars back in our native lands, and singing about being able to go back and being able to hold on to our languages and our families.
Abdallah was born in Sudan and lived in Egypt for a while before coming to the U.S. At 18, she's a mentor of sorts, along with other young women who've been in the chorus for a few years.
My name is Rita Chiro. I was born in Sudan, but I was also raised in a refugee camp in Kenya. For somebody to hear me sing and be like, wow, it makes me feel good, But I also love having more than one person's voice. Singing as a group, it sends a bigger message.
For chorus mate Eklis Ahmed, getting out the message is cathartic.
In my country, in Darfur, right now there's a genocide that is happening as I'm talking right now. And for me, I sing to feel better because I'm hopeless.
Director Con Fulham hopes the chorus will help these young people get back their voices. He began recruiting singers from schools in Portland more than 6 years ago.
Knowing that, for me, music has always been a very powerful healing thing, I thought that it would be a great idea to invite as many different refugee communities as possible.
At any given time, there are as many as 30 members from 14 countries, from Iraq to Cambodia. Fulham says the chorus evolved into a girls' group when boys didn't show up at practice. As to the name of the choir, Pasintu translates into, when she sings, her voice carries far, in Passamaquoddy. It's a language spoken by a Native American tribe in Maine. Performances might have been contained to Maine if not for Patrice Samara, a producer for Alphabet Kids, a line of children's books and CDs aimed at multicultural understanding. A lawyer for the company suggested she fly to Maine to check out Pasintu. She was smitten. In October, Alphabet Kids released a Pasintu CD. Samara has begun to book the chorus for performances outside of Maine. The first was in August in Washington, D.C. She hopes other choruses, inspired by Pasintu, will form.
Many towns have immigrants, so we're hoping that this model will be embraced around the country.
Eklis Ahmed is excited about the group's growing fame, but makes sure she stays connected to her native country through song.
I sing with my cousins a lot at home. Almost every Friday and Saturday night, we sing about Sudan. We sing just any songs that comes up in our head. We start singing right away.
A documentary about the chorus is scheduled for release sometime next year. Proceeds from the chorus will benefit charities in the girls' home countries. For VOA News, I'm Josie Huang in Portland, Maine.
This has been VOA's Middle East Monitor. Join us Monday through Friday for news from the region and of interest to the region. Coming up on International Edition, an analyst speaks with us about the Chinese government trying to cool one of the world's hottest economies. Thanks for tuning in to the Voice of America.
For more on the stories you've heard on our radio programs, visit our website at voanews.com. That's where you'll find in-depth reports, related stories, videos, and more from our team of correspondents. Or take the news with you by downloading podcasts of your favorite VOA programs. That's at voanews.com. Online news for a changing world.